Okay, so here it is, an updated review of this LECTRIC. This is the XP 3.0, the newest variation of the XP lineup from LECTRIC, which is an e-bike manufacturer. I have reviewed every iteration of their product ever since they basically launched their line here in the States, and you know, I've always been very impressed, and not so much impressed with the fact that it's an e-bike, because there's tons of e-bikes out there, but impressed for what you get for what you pay for electric e-bike. And what I mean by that is I didn't pay for this bike. This was sent to me for a review and evaluation on the channel from the folks at LECTRIC, just like all the previous iterations of this bike. But I know how much they cost. I know the sales that they run, and I know what their competitors charge for a very similar bike. And what I like about LECTRIC is the evolution of their bike, how they evolve it from something that is a very affordable bike to get into for this type of bike into something that continues to evolve with better upgrades, better components, while still kind of maintaining that same price point. So it's like they keep upgrading it, but they don't upgrade the price. And that's actually pretty important, because if you've looked at this brand and you look way back at the original videos that I've done on this bike, or any of the other reviewers who have reviewed the bike, you'll realize there have been a lot of significant improvements over the years. Every generation has more and more improvements. If you look at the XP 3.0, some of the big improvements is that they went with larger rotors for the brakes, so you have a more powerful braking system. They upgraded the headlamp on it, as well as made a welded on back rack, which is now capable of supporting 150 pounds. Plus, the bike in general is quieter than the previous iterations. When you go over bumps, when you hit things, the only noise that this bike makes comes from somewhere up here. I think it's the actual light kind of moving slightly, but there's not much noise at all. And it's a really, really efficient bike in terms of how smooth it is, how it feels to ride. But with every bike comes some things that you have to be, cautious of when you get into it. First of all, you're going to want to inflate the tires, because it's very likely that the tires aren't going to have the right amount of air pressure in it when you get it. You're going to want to make sure that your seat tube clamp right here is properly adjusted, so whenever you hit bumps and you start compressing this, it doesn't slide down in here or move side to side. You're going to want to make sure that the bolts here are properly tightened as well. That's probably the first thing that I realized when I started tackling this yard with the bike, is that the seat under big bumps would shift slightly and rotate. So you want to make sure all of that stuff is properly secured. When I first got the bike and I unboxed it, I actually wasn't able to power it on. And at first I thought something was wrong with the battery. I thought it could have been something, with the computer up front. But then I found out that this little plug right here was actually unplugged, and it was in the loom. Actually, this one right here, it was in the loom right here, and I couldn't actually find it. So while I was talking to the folks from LECTRIC to figure out what was wrong, I was looking down here at this plug right there, thinking it was the main connection point from up here to down there, and it very well may be, but this is actually where the plug came undone. And you simply plug it back in, and everything worked perfectly. Now you can see a lot of grass buildup. We recently mowed the grass, and I know a lot of folks aren't probably going to ride these over grass all the time, but it collected a lot of grass clippings. The fenders do a great job of keeping it from getting on you, but it still gets a lot of it on the framing itself. And you can see this little guard down here, which was completely caked with grass. I had to kind of peel all that off. Aside from that, it's a very competent feeling bike. Now, I know they put this comfort package with it, which gives you these really, really cushy seats, as well as a suspension seat post right here. I'll probably take that off and put a regular seat post. I like the saddle. The saddle's nice and comfy. It's cushy. It works well. But this isn't very progressive feeling. It feels kind of jerky as it goes up and down. It's not the most comfortable riding seat post if you've used suspension seat posts before. So instead of doing this motion when you hit bumps, it kind of does this little jerky motion on it, which I don't really care for. I'll be fine with just the springs that are underneath the seat itself. And going over this property is definitely bumpy. I rode quite a bit over it this morning just to kind of test it out and feel out how it works. The new headlight is phenomenal. I had a chance last night just to kind of turn it on. I didn't really ride with it, but the output of it's really nice, partially because they have an improved projector style lens up front, which is super cool. This specific unit actually has the extended range battery on it as well, which really, really boosts how far you can ride on this bike. And this specific bike was also upgraded with a few features that were included, such as the giant seat, which again is this big cushy seat, as well as the suspension seat post, which I probably wouldn't opt for that, but I think for Black Friday they're even offering it for free. So you get some of these upgrades at no charge, as well as the new Elite headlamp, which is that headlamp we just talked about. I probably would add the passenger package, which includes a seat that mounts right here, plus some handlebars off of the back. And I actually bought that for a previous electric bike, but I didn't install it because the rack was only capable of holding like 50 pounds or something like that, and I didn't want to over exceed the rack's capability, especially if you hit big bumps out here. You'd hate for that type of force or energy to break the rack off, and I didn't want to risk it. And with the new 150-pound rating, it definitely gives you some peace of mind there. Now, in terms of actual distance you can get on this bike, this specific one has the new long-range battery, which is 672 watt-hours. It has a 65-mile maximum range. This thing is pretty insane. But that maximum range, of course, is based on how you're riding it and your pedal assist mode. If you're in pedal assist 1, which essentially requires the most pedaling for the motor to engage, you can get upwards of 65 miles on the long-range battery or 45 miles on the standard. If you're in pedal assist 2, it's 50 miles on the long-range battery and 35 on the standard. Pedal assist 3, 35 miles on the long-range battery, 25 on the standard. Pedal assist 4, it's 30 on the long range and 21 on the standard. And pedal assist 5 is 25 miles on the long range and 17 miles on the standard battery that comes with it. And then if you're using throttle only, so the standard battery will actually get you a pretty respectable 20 miles. But on the long-range battery, you can get upwards of 30 miles, which is pretty dang amazing, which means you could ride this thing roughly 30 miles out without pedaling at all just by using pedal assist. And that's pretty telling, because this turns into a commuting tool versus just a recreational tool, which is something I think a lot of folks are looking at whenever they get into e-bikes. They want something that is as easy to use as possible, as comfortable as possible, but can get them as far out as they want, even if they don't want to have to pedal. And that's very respectable. But yeah, very happy with it. I've been riding it quite a bit today, having a lot of fun on it, super comfortable. Just again, make sure everything's tight, make sure everything's plugged in, tweaked, tires have the right pressure in them, everything is folded out and set up correctly, and you should have a lot of fun. Okay, so if you followed my Big Truck Big RV channel for a while, you've probably seen this bike on it a few times. This is what I consider to be a professional level mountain bike. And when I say professional level, everything about this bike screams professional, including the fact that this is an e-bike. Why do you want an e-bike if you're going to be a professional mountain biker? Well, mainly because you want to get up the hill before you can go down the hill. And the e-bike portion of this helps you ride up the hill so you can enjoy the downhill portion a lot more. Now, what makes a bike like this worth what you have to pay for it? To be frank with you, probably nothing. Components on bikes themselves are just so expensive that it's hard to get one and even to be an enthusiast about it and feel like you got a good deal on anything, because components just seem to always go up in price. They're changing the geometry of things, they're changing the specs, so you always have to constantly upgrade and evolve with it. Otherwise, you know, a front fork from today probably will be completely irrelevant 10 years from now because of all the different geometry changes, the way they mount into the bike, all of that stuff. But when you look at a bike like this, you know, this bike right here, as configured, is $14,000. Not even kidding you. It's insane. It's a ridiculous price, and I paid it because I'm an idiot. But the fact is that if you want a bike that bleeds confidence, that essentially makes you feel as if you can take this bike anywhere and ride it, you're going to be safe, this is the type of bike you would need for that. There's a lot of really high-end brands, and this by far is not the most expensive among them, believe it or not. A lot of things like your carbon fiber frame, but not just having a carbon fiber frame, but trusting that you're going to survive after a very, very intense downhill ride or trail ride with this carbon fiber frame is one of the aspects of it. You have a brand like Cannondale who produces really, really good frames. A lot of other brands do as well, but that's part of it. So you pay a lot of money for the frame. Even the components on this bike are insanely expensive. The front shock alone was like $1,300. The mid shock right here was like $1,000. Just some of the components like the back little disc brake right here was a couple $100. The hydraulic brakes on here, very expensive. The shifting system, very expensive. Having this Bosch motor here in the center, extremely expensive. There's a lot of money that goes into these bikes. Even the technology to give you a dropper post. And now they have wireless dropper bumper posts. They have wireless shifters. They have all sorts of technology that can make a bike that's already insanely expensive be a lot more insanely expensive. So whenever you see things like Electric ebike, that brand that I just showed you, think about it this way. This front fork alone costs more than that entire bike. Do you really think that it costs more to manufacture that front fork than it does to produce an entire electric e-bike? Probably not. But the fact is, when I talk about value, what you get for the price, it's hard for me to tell someone to justify a super expensive bike or even a bike that's a couple of $1,000s when you may not need that type of bike, and an electric bike is going to be more appropriate for you. So the video that I recently produced on Big Truck Big RV was really all about the premise that the electric bike is a great value bike. You get a ton of components, a ton of capability, a lot of comfort, a lot of upgradability in a bike that costs as much as, you know, my middle shock right there. That's how much things on bikes like this cost, when you can get an entire bike that will probably do more than you would ever need it, and it'll save you a lot of money. And to be frank with you, I ride my electric bike far more than I ride this bike, because we don't have mountains and hills around here. So I have to go somewhere if I really want to put this thing through its paces. But the reality of that story is, if I take an electric bike where I take this bike, I would probably hurt myself on an electric bike. It might do it one time, it may not do it very well, but I'm more likely to hurt myself on that bike because it's just not designed for what this bike is designed to do. So, you know, when I talk about bikes, I am a biking enthusiast. I like good bikes, I like high-end bikes, but I'll tell you, I use that electric bike a ton around here. It makes commuting around the property and getting from little point A to point B's and picking things up and moving stuff around so much easier, because I can't do that kind of stuff on this bike. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll throw a link in this video to electric e-bikes if you want to check them out. Again, it's not that it's the best bike. It's not even what I would consider to be a mid-level electric bike. Those bikes are like $6,000, $7,000. I consider it to be a very capable, low-cost bike that is built well, gives you tons and tons of upgrades, and constantly is evolving, and it's at a phenomenal price point. What more can you ask for? It's the value leader in my opinion. Anyways, guys, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up. I'm going to take this thing for a ride. Be right back.